Well now, it's 3 in the morning here on WFLD-FM, and if you're up with me at this hour, I reckon you've got your reasons. Maybe you're working a shift. Maybe sleep just wouldn't come tonight. Maybe you're like me, and sometimes the quiet hours are the only ones big enough to hold the kind of thinking you need to do. Either way, I'm glad you're here. I truly am. This is Parcels Deep Dives, and I'm Ripp Tucker. And tonight we're going to open up a new week of looking at what's been happening over in the parcels-code parcels repository on GitHub. If you've been with me before, you know what this is and you know why I care about it. But if this is your first time finding us on the dial at this ungodly hour, well, let me set the table for you proper. Parcels. And I do love the way that name sits in the mouth. Parcels is a set of tools written in Python for tracking particles in the ocean. Now, when I say particles, I don't just mean one kind of thing. I mean water itself. I mean plankton, those tiny living things that are the foundation of just about every food chain in the sea. I mean plastic, which, Lord help us, is out there too, moving with the currents, going places we wish it wouldn't. I mean fish, migrating across distances that would humble any of us. Parcels takes the output from ocean circulation models, these big computational pictures of how water moves around the globe, and it lets scientists drop virtual particles into that flow and watch where they go. And I want you to think about that for a second. I was sitting out on my porch earlier today, well, yesterday now I suppose, watching clouds roll over the Catawbas, and I got to thinking about how water moves. You ever watch a creek after a good rain? The way it finds every low point, every gap between stones, the way it splits and rejoins and carries little bits of leaf and twig along with it? That's what Parcels is modeling, but at the scale of the whole ocean. The Gulf Stream, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, water that's been traveling since before your grandparents were born, carrying things along with it, some alive, some not, all of it going somewhere whether we understand why or not. And the beautiful thing, the thing that keeps me coming back to this repository week after week is that it's open source. Anybody can look at it. Anybody can contribute to it. It's scientists and developers from around the world building this thing together the same way folks in Nantahala used to come together to raise a barn. You bring what you've got, you put in your time, and when you're done, something's standing that wasn't standing before, and it belongs to everybody. Now, let me tell you what the shape of it looks like before we get into the particulars over the coming days. We had activity on 4 out of 7 days, Monday through Wednesday and then Friday. Thursday, Saturday, and today were quiet, at least on the commit side. 7 commits total across those 4 days, which, that's a steady pace. That's not somebody in a panic. That's somebody doing the work day by day, deliberate-like water on stone. Not trying to break through all at once, just showing up. The name you're going to hear the most this week is Nick Hodgskin. Nick was in there every one of those 4 active days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. Just steady, consistent work. That kind of presence in a repository tells you something about a person. It tells you they're carrying the weight right now, tending to the thing, keeping it moving forward. I respect that deeply. Time is the one thing you can't make more of, and Nick's been spending his on this. Alongside Nick, we've got a couple other names. Joe Schoonover shows up on Wednesday with a commit, and I'm curious to dig into what Joe brought to the table when we get to that day. And then there's our old friend, the pre-commit bot, pre-commit-sci they call it, doing its automated work on Monday, tending to configuration, keeping the garden weeded so the humans can focus on planting. Most of the work this week is touching the main branch, which means it's going into the heart of the project. There's one branch off to the side on Monday for that bot work. Pre-commit configuration updates, but otherwise, this is all flowing straight into main. That tells me these aren't experiments, these are decisions. Things somebody looked at, thought about, and said, yes, this is ready. As for themes, well, we'll get into the details day by day as the week goes on. But from where I'm sitting, this looks like a week of steady maintenance and careful improvement. The kind of work that don't make headlines but makes everything else possible. Like the folks who keep the fire going in a wood-fired kiln through the night. Nobody sees them do it. But come morning, that clay has become something lasting, and it's because somebody stayed up and tended the flame. That's what we've got ahead of us this week on Parcels Deep Dives. 4 days of commits. Good, honest work by people who care about understanding how our oceans move. We're going to give every one of those commits the attention it deserves because somebody put their time into it, and that matters. So settle in. Pour yourself whatever keeps you company at this hour. We've got a good week to walk through, and there ain't no reason to rush. This is WFLD-FM. I'm Ripp Tucker. Stay with me. 3 in the morning, April the 19th. The kind of hour where the world gets real quiet and you can hear the creek talking to itself down below the ridge. If you're up right now, and I know some of you are because this is when the night shift folks and the ones whose minds won't settle down find their way to us. Well, I appreciate the company, truly. This is Parcels Deep Dives on WFLD-FM. I'm Ripp Tucker, and tonight we're looking back at Monday, April the 13th. One day, one set of commits. Let's see what the water carried in. 2 commits landed on Monday, just 2. But I'll tell you what, sometimes 2 stones dropped in the right place can change where the whole creek runs. Let's start with the big one. Nick Hodgskin, and I want to say that name proper because the man put in work. Nick Hodgskin pushed a commit at about 4 in the afternoon, co-authored with Erik van Sebille. The commit message reads, add parcels.datasets.remote. Pull request 2574, 450 lines added, 370 removed, 27 files touched. 27 files. You hear that number? And you might think somebody went on a rampage through the code base. But look closer. Look at what those files are, and you see something different. You see care. You see somebody who understood that when you change how a project finds its data, you got to follow that thread everywhere it goes. Parcels, for those just joining us on these late night hours, tracks particles through ocean currents, virtual particles, plankton, plastic, water itself. And to do that, it needs data, oceanographic data, the kind that don't always live on your machine. Sometimes it's out there, remote, sitting on a server somewhere, waiting to be called down like rain from a cloud that hasn't broken yet. What Nick did here was give the project a proper way to talk about where that data lives. A module, parcels.datasets.remote. That underscore at the front, that's a convention. It's like putting something in the back room of the shop. It's there, it works, it's important, but it ain't for customers to go rummaging through directly. Internal plumbing. The kind of thing that makes everything else run cleaner. Now here's what gets me. Look at the files that changed. You got your CI recipe file, the instructions for how the project builds and tests itself, just a small touch there, 1 line added, 1 removed. Then you got documentation, tutorials, quick start guides, example notebooks, tutorial output, tutorial quick start, tutorial on Argo floats. Those are real ocean instruments, by the way, little autonomous floats that drift through the deep ocean collecting data. Beautiful things. Tutorial on 3-dimensional ocean collecting data. Beautiful things. Tutorial on delayed particle starts. Tutorial on diffusion, which is just how things spread out over time. Same way a drop of dye spreads in still water. Same way the smell of a good mash spreads through the holler on a warm evening. Every single one of those tutorials got updated. Lines removed, outnumbering lines added in most cases. That tells me Nick cleaned things up, made them simpler. When you centralize where your remote data comes from, give it one home, one proper address, then everywhere else in the code that used to have its own little workaround for fetching data, all that gets shorter, cleaner, like clearing deadfall out of a creek bed so the water runs true. And Erik van Sebille is on there as co-author. Erik's one of the principal folks behind Parcels, has been for years. That co-authorship means this wasn't just code review, this was collaboration. 2 people shaping something together. Like throwing pots with somebody, one person centers the clay, the other shapes the wall. You can tell when work has 2 sets of hands in it. It's steadier. 450 lines in, 370 out, net gain of 80 lines. But the real gain ain't in the count, it's in the structure. The project knows where its data lives now. One place, one truth. That's good engineering. That's like knowing which spring feeds your creek. You don't have to guess anymore, now. The second commit of the day came later, about 8 in the evening, and it's from our old friend the pre-commit bot. Automated, nobody's hands on it directly. The message reads precommit.ci, pre-commit autuk date, 3 lines changed, 3 lines changed back, 1 file, the pre-commit configuration. What happened here is the tools that check code before it gets committed, the ones that enforce style, catch mistakes, keep things tidy. Those tools got version bumps. Zizmore went from 123.1 to 124.1. Rough, the Python style checker, ticked up from 15.9 to 15.10. Small moves, this is maintenance, the kind of thing nobody writes home about. But it matters the way sharpening your tools matters. You don't notice a sharp axe until you've used a dull one. These little updates keep the project standards current, keep the blade keen. So that was Monday, April the 13th. 2 commits, one that reshapes how the whole project thinks about where its ocean data comes from. 27 files, careful as a potter trimming a foot ring, and 1 quiet automated update that keeps the tooling honest. The day ended with the code base a little cleaner than it started, a little more organized, a little more sure of itself. That's all you can ask of any day, really. The clouds were probably moving over Utrecht that evening. That's where a lot of the parcels folks work, moving the way clouds do, carrying water from one place to another, same as this code carries particles through simulated seas. Everything's connected if you sit with it long enough. I'm Ripp Tucker. This has been Parcels Deep Dives. We'll pick up the next day's work tomorrow night. For now, if you're awake, be easy on yourself. And if you're just drifting off, well... 3 in the morning, Sunday morning to be particular about it. April the 19th, 2026, the kind of hour where the world gets real quiet and you can hear the creek if you listen close enough. I appreciate y'all being out there tonight, the night workers, the ones who can't sleep, the ones who just like the dark. This is Parcels Deep Dives on WFLD-FM, and I'm Ripp Tucker, and we're going to spend a little while together looking at what happened in the Parcels repository this past Tuesday, April the 14th. 2 commits, both by the same hand, Nick Hodgskin, and both about the same thing, which is keeping the water from getting into places it shouldn't be just yet. Let me set this up for you. Parcels, for those of you just tuning in at this ungodly hour, Parcels is a tool for tracking particles in the ocean. Virtual particles, mind you. You feed it data from ocean circulation models and it tells you where things go. Water, plankton, plastic, fish. It's like watching a leaf fall into a creek and knowing, really knowing, where that leaf's going to end up 3 hollows down. Except they do it with math and code and supercomputers. But the principle's the same. You watch the current, you follow the flow. Now, Tuesday, Nick Hodgskin comes in, and I say comes in, but for all I know, the man was sitting at a kitchen table somewhere or standing at a desk in a lab in the Netherlands. But he shows up in the commit log at 10,002 in the morning, Universal Time. And what he does is he puts up a fence. The commit message reads, and I like these because they're plain, maint, temporarily pins array less than 2026.4 to on. Pull request 2577. Now what does that mean? Xarray is a library, a tool that other tools depend on. Parcels uses it to handle all that gridded ocean data, the temperatures, the currents, the depths, all of it arranged in these big structured arrays. Think of it like the shelving system in a root cellar. Everything's got a place, everything's labeled, and Xarray is what keeps it all organized so you can reach in and grab what you need. Well, Xarray put out a new version, 2026.20, and something in it didn't sit right with Parcels. Could be a change in how it handles something under the hood. Could be a subtle shift in behavior that breaks a test somewhere downstream. I don't know the specifics and the commit don't say. But Nick knew enough to say, hold on now, we're not ready for that yet. So he pinned it. Told the build system, the recipe file for the package, and the Pixie configuration. Don't go grabbing that new version. Stay with what we know works. 2 files changed, 1 line each. 2 little additions, 2 little subtractions. Surgical. And then, 2.5 hours later at 12,035, he comes back. Same fix, different file. Maint temporarily pins array less than 2026.Doherty part due. Pull request 2578. This time it's by project.toml, the project's own declaration of what it needs to run. 1 line in, 1 line out. Now that tells me something. The first fix didn't catch everything. The build probably ran, something still pulled in the wrong version through a different door. And Nick had to go find that other door and lock it too. And I think about this kind of thing when I'm watching weather come over the ridge line. This is the work that don't make nobody famous. Nobody's going to write a paper about temporarily pinning a dependency. There's no glory in it. It's like when a creek starts cutting a new channel after heavy rain and you got to go out there and stack some rocks to keep it from washing out your path. You don't take a picture of it. You just do it because it needs doing and you're the one who noticed. That word temporarily in the commit message. I want to sit with that a second. Nick didn't say remove Xarray support. He didn't say we're done with this. He said temporarily, meaning we'll come back. When Xarray sorts out whatever changed or when Parcels adapts to it, that pin comes out and the water flows free again. It's a patch on the levee, not a dam. 2 commits, 3 lines changed across 3 files. And every single one of them is someone saying, I'm paying attention and I'm not going to let this break on my watch. That's where Tuesday left things in the Parcels repository. The fence is up. The creek's still flowing, and somewhere out there the ocean keeps moving whether we're ready for it or not. Y'all take it easy out there tonight. We'll be back with Wednesday's story soon enough. This is Ripp Tucker, WFLD-FM, deep in the quiet hours. 3 o'clock in the morning. Sunday, April the 19th. You're listening to WFLD-FM, and this is Parcels Deep Dives. If you're up at this hour, well, you and I are keeping the same kind of company tonight. The kind where the house is quiet and your mind won't settle down. I've been sitting here watching clouds drift past the moon through the studio window, thin ones, stretched out like somebody pulled cotton apart real slow. Cirrus, I think they call them. They move up there at 30, 40,000 feet, and from down here they look like they ain't moving at all. But they are. Everything's moving. You just got to be patient enough to see it. Tonight we're looking back at Wednesday, April the 15th in the parcels repository. 2 commits landed that day. Just 2. But let me tell you, sometimes a creek that don't look like much on the surface is cutting deep into the bedrock where you can't see. Let's start with the earlier one. Nick Hodgskin, 8 in the morning, and I respect a person who's at it that early. His commit fixes something in the conversion tools. The message reads, fix convert.FESOM togrid dimension renaming. Now, FESOM, that's a model for how the ocean moves, and it uses what they call an unstructured grid. Think of it like if you took a fishing net and instead of making every square the same size, you let some be real small where you need detail and some be real big where you don't. That's an unstructured mesh. And converting between one shape of data and another, that's harder than it sounds. It's like trying to pour moonshine from a mason jar into a flask with a different neck. The liquid's the same, but the vessel matters. Nick touched 3 files, 46 lines added and 41 removed in that remote datasets file. That's not a patch, that's a reworking. When you see numbers like that, where the adds and removes are close together, that tells you somebody rewrote how something fundamental works. They didn't just tack something on. They went in and reshaped it. 7 new lines in the convert module itself and 12 new lines of tests. Every fix comes with proof it works. That's the kind of thing that separates craft from just tinkering. Now, and that word, fence posting. I want to taste that for a second because it's a real specific kind of problem. You know how if you're building a fence that's 30 feet long with posts every 10 feet, you don't need 3 posts, you need 4? 1 at the start, 1 at the end, and 2 in between. That's a fence post error. You're off by 1. And in computing, being off by 1 is the kind of thing that don't look wrong until it really, really matters. Here's what was happening. When Parcels ran a simulation, tracking particles through ocean currents, the execute function was overshooting the particle trajectories by exactly 1 time step, 1 step too far. And at the same time, it was repeating the initial position in the output. So you'd get the starting point twice, and then the ending point would be 1 step past where it should have stopped. Like a clock that rings 13 times at noon. Everything after that you can't trust. The fix is elegant in the way that good fixes are. Joe switched from prepenning the position update to appending it. Think about it like this. If you're writing down where a leaf is floating in a creek, do you write down where it starts before you let the water move it, or do you let the water move it and then write down where it ended up? The order matters. The answer is the same leaf, same creek, same water, but the record of the journey changes depending on when you look. 124 lines added, 40 removed across 9 files. The kernel, that's the heart of the computation engine. Got 17 lines added and 23 taken away. Net negative. He made the core simpler while fixing a real problem. That's like a woodworker who repairs a chair and it ends up lighter than when they started. The particle set file, the test files, test for advection, for particle output, for execution, for the set views, all of them adjusted. 8 files touched by test alone. Joe didn't just fix it for today. He fixed it so that if it ever tries to break again, somebody will know. 2 commits, 2 people. 1 morning, 1 evening. Nick straightening out how data transforms between shapes. Joe correcting the fundamental rhythm of how a simulation records its own history. Neither one flashy. Neither one the kind of thing that makes a headline. But both of them are someone saying, this matters enough to get right. Water don't fight the mountain. It just keeps going. And these folks, they just keep going. That's Wednesday, April the 15th. I'll be here through the deep hours if you are. This is Parcels Deep Dives on WFLD-FM. 3 in the morning. Sunday. And tonight we're looking back at Friday, April the 17th, 2026, and what happened in the parcels-code parcels repository. 1 day, 1 commit. Sometimes that's all it takes. Now, for those of you just joining us on these late night hours, maybe you're on shift, maybe you just can't sleep, maybe the Lord's got you up for a reason you ain't figured out yet. Parcels is an ocean science project. Python code that tracks particles moving through ocean currents. Water, plankton, plastic, fish even. You feed it data from ocean circulation models and it simulates where things go, where the current carries them. It's watching the water find its way, same as a creek finds its way down a mountain hollow, except somebody wrote the math to make a computer do it. So Friday, 1 commit landed, just the 1, from Nick Hodgskin. Came in early morning, 6:53, coordinated universal time, so depending on where Nick sits, that's either a real early start or a late night wrapping up. Either way, someone was thinking about this project when most folks weren't. The commit message reads, make pi triangle a tutorial dependency, pull request, 2581. 6 lines added, 2 removed. 3 files touched. Now I know what some of y'all might think. 6 lines? That's barely anything. That's not even a paragraph. But let me tell you something, and this is true of code, same as is true of a good piece of Catawba Valley pottery. Sometimes the smallest adjustment is the one that matters most. You move a kiln shelf a 1/4 inch and the draft changes and the glaze comes out different. 6 lines can be the difference between a new person sitting down with the tutorials and getting stuck or not getting stuck. Let me walk through what happened here. First file, pixie.toml. That's the project's dependency configuration. 1 line change. They moved PyTriangle into the tutorial dependencies. PyTriangle, far as I understand it, is a library for working with triangular meshes. Computational geometry. The kind of thing you'd need if you're working through examples that deal with unstructured grids. Which ocean models use because the ocean floor ain't a nice even grid. It's jagged and deep and complicated. Like the terrain around here, honestly. You can't map these mountains on graph paper and expect it to mean anything. So somebody, maybe Nick, maybe somebody who filed an issue, tried to run a tutorial and hit a wall. Dependency wasn't there. And Nick went in and fixed it. That's just being a good neighbor. You see the fence post leaning, you straighten it, you don't wait for somebody to ask. Second file, the git ignore. 1 line changed. +1, -1, so a replacement, not an addition. Housekeeping, making sure the right files get tracked and the wrong ones don't. You don't trip over what ain't supposed to be on the floor. Third file, and this one I find real interesting, the pull request template, 4 lines added. A pull request template is the form that comes up when somebody wants to contribute a change. It's the door they walk through, and when you add to that template, you're shaping how every future contributor thinks about their own work before they submit it. You're saying, here, consider this too. Think about this before you knock. 4 lines added to that template tells me somebody's paying attention to the process, not just the product. That's craft. That's someone who understands that how you build matters as much as what you build. So that was Friday. 1 commit, 3 files, a dependency made visible so newcomers don't stumble. A git ignored tidied up. Nobody's going to write a headline about it. But that's the work, ain't it? The water don't carve the mountain in one big dramatic flood. I mean, sometimes it does, but mostly it's just persistence. One small thing after another. And you wake up 1,000 years later and there's a gorge where there used to be a ridge. Nick Hodgskin was here on Friday, April the 17th. And he made it a little bit better for whoever comes next. That's where the day left things. Quiet, tidy, ready. Y'all stay with me. More to come on WFLD-FM. This got me thinking about something. We've been sitting here all week looking at how Parcels tracks these little virtual particles, bits of water, bits of plastic, plankton, whatever you set loose in the simulation, and watching them get carried by ocean currents across the whole globe. But what it got me thinking about ain't the ocean. It got me thinking about smoke. Now stay with me here. When I was maybe 11, 12 years old, my daddy took me and my brother Harlan up to the ridge above our place in Nantahala. It was October, early morning, and the whole valley was filled with fog. But it wasn't just fog. Somebody down in the hollow was burning leaves, maybe brush, maybe a little bit of both, and you could see the smoke threading its way through the fog, these thin ribbons of it just weaving, not going straight up, not going anywhere in particular. It was moving with the fog, getting pulled by whatever the air was doing in that hollow, following channels you couldn't see with your eyes, but the smoke could feel. And Daddy pointed at it and said, I'll never forget this. He said, that smoke knows more about the shape of this mountain than any map you'll ever read. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. I thought he was just being Daddy, saying something that sounded important while we stood there cold. But he was right. He was exactly right. The smoke was tracing the topology of the hollow. Every little dip, every ridge, every place where the air pooled and eddied, the smoke found it and showed it to you. It was a particle tracer, right there on that Appalachian mountainside. Same principle as what Parcels does with virtual ocean particles. You release something into a flow, and it reveals the hidden structure of the thing it's moving through. And I think about that a lot, actually. Because you can't see air. You can't see air. You can't see air. You can't see air. You can't see a current. You can't see the way water really moves under the surface of the ocean any more than you can see the wind. But you put something in it, smoke, a leaf, a virtual particle in a simulation, and suddenly you can see everything. The flow becomes visible. The invisible architecture of the world just shows itself. That's what Lagrangian tracking is, at its heart. You ain't measuring the flow at fixed points. That'd be the Eulerian way, which is like sticking a bunch of thermometers in the river and hoping you understand what the river's doing. No. Lagrangian tracking says forget the fixed points, ride the thing, go where it goes, and where you end up tells you what the system really is. Now, and here's where my mind went sideways, which it tends to do at 3 in the morning. I started thinking about wood-fired kilns. If you've ever watched a wood-fired kiln in operation, a real one, an anagamma or a noborigama, the kind they've been doing down in the Catawba Valley and the kind the old potters in Japan been doing for centuries, you know that fire doesn't just go where you point it. You build the kiln with a certain shape, certain chambers, certain draft channels. Then you light the fire and you surrender a little, because the fire is going to find its own path through that kiln. The flames, the heat, the ash, they're all flowing through the kiln the same way an ocean current flows through a basin. There's structure guiding them, but within that structure there's a wildness you can't fully predict. And the way a potter learns the kiln, the way they really learn it over years and years, is by reading the results. You load the pots, you fire, and when you open that kiln up after it cools, every pot is a record of what the fire did. Where the ash fell heavy, you get that beautiful natural glaze, that wabi-sabi surface, all greens and browns and grays. Where the fire licked hardest, you get flashing, that copper-red blush on the clay. Where it was sheltered, the clay stays raw, matte, unchanged. Every pot in that kiln is a particle that got tracked through a flow. The good potter, the patient one, they do this again and again, firing after firing, and they start to build a mental model of how the fire moves through that kiln. They learn the currents. They learn where the eddies are, where the heat pools, where the draft pulls hardest. They can't see the fire flowing, not really, not the way it moves through every inch of that chamber, but the pots tell them. The pots are the data. That's what Parcels is doing. Every virtual particle released into that simulated ocean is a pot in the kiln. And when the simulation finishes, you read the results and you learn what the ocean actually did. Where did the plastic end up? Where did the plankton congregate? Where does the water itself go when it leaves this particular spot? The particles tell you what the invisible currents won't, and it goes further than that. Think about what you're really doing when you track a particle through a flow. You're asking a question about connection. If something starts here, where does it end up? And the answer tells you something profound about how the world is stitched together. That plastic bottle that falls in the Ganges, where's it going? Those fish larvae spawning off the coast of Australia, where does the current take them? What's connected to what? That's the same question my daddy was answering when he watched the smoke. Where does this hollow connect to the next one? Where does the air go? In the mountains? And I don't talk about this enough, but it matters. Sound travels the same way. The hollows channel sound like they channel air. There's a place back home, I won't say exactly where, but you can stand on one ridge and hear somebody talking on another ridge, clear as Sunday morning church bells, even though they're a quarter mile away and there's a whole valley between you. The sound follows the hollow. It rides the shape of the land. The topology carries it. And now this is the part where my mind really gets going. It follows the shape of the network the way smoke follows the shape of a hollow, the way fire follows the shape of a kiln, the way ocean currents follow the shape of a basin. Sometimes you get congestion. That's your eddy, your pooling. Sometimes you get a fast lane, a jet stream through the backbone. And sometimes a packet gets lost the way a leaf gets caught in a backwater behind a rock. What do network engineers do when they want to understand how their network really behaves? They release tracers. Trace route, ping. They put something in the flow and watch where it goes and how long it takes to get there. Lagrangian tracking, same as parcels, same as the smoke on the mountainside, same as the pots in the kiln. It's all the same idea. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the world really only has a handful of deep patterns, and everything else is variations on a theme. Water carved these mountains the same way refactoring carves a code base. Slowly, persistently, following the path of least resistance until the whole shape of the thing changes. And tracking particles through a flow, whether it's ocean water or kiln fire or data packets or smoke in a hollow, that's one of those deep patterns. It's how you make the invisible visible. Now I want to come back to something because it's been nagging at me. The Parcels folks, and God bless them for this, they made it so you can define custom kernels. Little bits of code that tell each particle how to behave at every step. You ain't just dropping a passive dot into the current and watching it drift. You can say, this particle, this one right here, it sinks a little, or it swims, or it fragments when the temperature hits a certain threshold, or it dies after so many days. You can give each particle its own story, its own set of rules. That hit me because that's what makes a community, isn't it? You got all these people, these particles, if you will, all moving through the same system, the same economy, the same landscape, the same set of currents pushing and pulling on everybody. But each person's got their own kernel, their own set of rules about how they respond to the forces acting on them. One person, the current hits them and they swim harder. Another person, same current, they let it carry them. Another person, they sink. You can't understand the whole system by just looking at the currents. You have to know the kernels too. You have to know what's inside each particle. My mama, she raised 12 of us, Lord knows how. She used to say that everybody's carrying a weight you can't see. And I think what she meant was something like this. You see a person moving through the world and you think you understand their trajectory, but you don't know their kernel. You don't know the rules they're operating under, the burdens, the buoyancy, the things that make them rise or sink in a given moment. Parcels lets you define all that. For virtual particles in a simulated ocean, sure. But the principle is bigger than that. And you know what else? The way Parcels handles time. They got this notion of running simulations forward or backward in time. You can say, this plastic ended up on this beach, now trace it back. Where did it come from? Run the clock in reverse. Follow the particle upstream through the currents until you find its origin. At 3 in the morning, that feels almost theological to me. The idea that you can look at where something ended up and work backwards to understand how it got there. That's the whole project of history, isn't it? That's what we do when we look at the world as it is and try to figure out how it came to be this way. Every historian, every geologist, every person sitting up late wondering how their life turned out the way it did, they're running a backward Lagrangian simulation, tracing the particle back through the currents. My granddaddy used to make a certain kind of spirit. Let's just leave it at that. And he always said the secret wasn't in the recipe. Wasn't in the corn, wasn't in the sugar, wasn't even in the water, though the water mattered more than most people think. He said the secret was in the patience. You let the mash do what the mash is going to do. You let the fermentation find its own pace. You don't rush the still. You let the heat rise the way it wants to rise, and you pay attention, and you make your cuts clean. When I read about parcels and how they handle these simulations, the adaptive time steps, the way they let the physics guide the computation, the way they don't force the particle to move faster than the data can support, I hear my granddaddy talking. Don't rush the still. Let the process be what it is. Trust the physics. Trust the flow. There's a humility in that. In Lagrangian tracking, in pottery, in the craft of making things the old way, you're not commanding the system. You're not standing over the ocean saying, go here. You're releasing something into it and saying, show me, teach me, I'll watch, I'll learn. That's what Parcels is, at its best. A way of saying to the ocean, I don't fully understand you yet, but I built this thing that lets me ask you questions, and I'm willing to sit here and listen to the answers for as long as it takes. It's 3:15 now. I looked out the window about an hour ago and there was a deck of stratus just sitting there low, not moving, like it was thinking about something. I bet if you could seed that cloud with 1,000,000 tiny tracers and watch where each one went, you'd learn something about the sky that no satellite could tell you from above. You'd learn it from the inside. The way the smoke learned the hollow, the way the fire learned the kiln, the way the particle learns the ocean, that's Parcels. That's what they built. One commit at a time, one kernel at a time, one simulation at a time. Neighbors helping neighbors figure out how the water moves. And I think that's a fine thing to be doing with your time on this earth. We'll be right back. Well now, it's 3 in the morning on a Sunday, and the world outside is about as quiet as it gets. I can hear the clock on the wall and not much else. If you're up right now, and you are, 'cause you're hearing my voice, then I reckon you and me are keeping watch together. That's all right. Somebody ought to. Let's bring this week home. We spent the better part of this week walking through the parcels-code parcels repository, and I want to take a minute to look back at the trail we covered. Because it told a story, even if nobody sat down to write one. Stories have a way of telling themselves if you pay attention. Monday we had 2 commits. That's where the ground got broken. Felt like somebody walking into the workshop first thing in the morning, turning on the lights, seeing what needed doing, getting hands on the clay before it had time to cool. That's how a week starts when folks mean business. Tuesday, 2 more. What struck me about Tuesday was the steadiness of it. No fanfare. Just work following work, the way one creek feeds into another. You could feel the direction forming. Somebody knew where they were headed, even if they hadn't announced it to the world. Wednesday gave us another pair, and by then you could see the shape of the thing, like watching clouds stack up along the ridgeline and knowing what kind of afternoon you're in for. The commits were building on each other, layers of intention, each one saying, I see what came before me, and I'm going to carry it further. And I don't say that like it's a failing. I say it like a rest note in a piece of music. Sometimes the most important thing that happens in a week is the day nothing happens. That's the day the work settles. That's the day it cures. Friday brought us one more, just one. That single commit felt like a capstone, like the last stone set on a dry stack wall. Not the biggest stone, not the showiest, but the one that says this holds. 7 commits across the week. Now, some folks might look at that number and think small. But I've watched water work on granite my whole life, and I can tell you, it ain't about volume. It's about consistency. Showing up and applying pressure in the right place over and over until the mountain gives you a path. That's what this week was. Careful, deliberate work. Not a sprint toward some deadline. Not a panic, just craft. The kind of work where every commit matters because somebody decided it mattered, somebody gave their time, and like I always say, time is the one thing you cannot brew more of. Lord knows I've tried. The Parcels Project, tracking particles across the ocean, understanding how water moves and carries things. It's the kind of work that requires patience measured in years. The people tending this code base understand that. You can see it in the rhythm. You can see it in the care. This ain't code written by people in a hurry. This is code written by people who respect what the ocean does and are trying to listen to it honestly. That's a rare thing in this world, and it deserves to be noticed even at 3 in the morning when most sensible people are asleep. So that's our week. 7 commits. A story of steady hands and quiet purpose. This has been Parcels Deep Dives on WFLD-FM. I'm Ripp Tucker. The clouds are supposed to break by morning, so if you're up early enough, you might catch a good sunrise over the valley. Go get some rest if you can. And if you can't, well, the creek's still running, the code's still there, and somebody, somewhere, is getting ready to make the next commit. Good night, y'all.